Hey everyone, it's Evan Kirstel. I have another great discussion today with Tom Garrison, VP and GM of Intel's Client Security Strategy and Initiatives. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for chatting. A big fan of everything you guys do at Intel, and was particularly keen to learn more about your team. Hope you're back and forth from the summer. How was your summer? How was your break? How was Labor Day?
Oh, it's fantastic. I spent a week just recently doing some fishing over on the mouth of the Columbia River, and it was fantastic. Got lots of
Oh
fish,
my
had lots of
gosh.
good time, spent time outside.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. Well, look forward to seeing some pictures. But let's dive right in. Before we actually talk about you and your team and your mission at Intel, I was reading on your LinkedIn bio, you are in your 28th, 29th year at Intel. That is fantastic. That is
Yeah.
quite a journey. Give us a little peek into your personal bio there. That's
Yeah,
something to
it's
behold.
kind of crazy. I grew up in this area. I tell people I went to grade school, junior high, high school, and college all within an 11-mile radius. And
Of
now I've worked at Intel, and I've moved around the world, but
course.
still in that same 11-mile radius, kind of crazy. But yeah, it's I've spent a lot of time here in the U.S., obviously in different roles, in marketing roles and sales roles. On the data center side, I spent most of my career on the server and data center side of the business, and then about 7 or 8 years ago, I transitioned over into the client business. But I've lived overseas. I lived in Munich, Germany. I lived in Singapore for some time. And so it's really been a blessing for me to work for a company like Intel, which allows me the ability to do so many different roles, to experience the world, to meet amazing people. Some of the most brilliant people on the planet work for this company, and I get to interact with them on a daily basis. So it has been a blessing for over 28 years now. Um, and Yeah, it's been fun.
That's fantastic. I'm sure there are tons of stories there that we could chat about. Well, we're going to talk more about your present mission around security. And it's an interesting one because you don't hear that sort of messaging from Intel a lot. So give us a brief into what you and your team do within Intel exactly.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, my team is focused on keeping our platform safe. And so, what does that mean? It means when there are vulnerabilities that are found in our products, then we swarm those issues. We find mitigations to those security vulnerabilities. We validate those mitigations, make sure that they work properly, and then we work with our partners, our OEM partners, to get those fixes out. And so we do that both with working with external researchers who are looking at our platforms outside of our company. And then also, even within my group and other parts of Intel, we employ lots and lots of security researchers ourselves. And so we aim to try to find as many of these vulnerabilities ourselves. And so we're on the leading edge of security research to really try to break our own products. So that's one part of my group. Another part of my group works with designers and developers throughout the rest of the company in order to share best known methods and work them through processes that ensure that they're designing the safest possible designs and circuits and whatnot in their products. And then we also have another aspect of my group, which is looking at how we take some of the data that we can collect in our interface into our platforms and turn those potentially even into services. My group has we're focused on security and those kinds of aspects, but from a breadth that most people don't expect. And we don't really, even my group right now, we don't do a lot of feature based items. There's a whole other group in Intel that looks at security features within our designs. My group doesn't work on that, but we focus on this broader sense of security.
That's fascinating. It's such an overlooked area, the whole question of hardware slash OEM embedded security. So, if I'm an OEM, a developer developing a product or device, how do I build trust into the product? What are some of the aspects you collaborate with your customers on?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and it's not an easy answer. So I'll try to give you at least aspects of an answer. Um, the first is when you're talking about security, it really boils down to trust. Who do you trust? And um, the industry has grown over the years. If you can remember, not that long ago, actually, maybe 10, 15 years ago, when people were thinking about security, they were thinking about protecting the application because you had, you know, teenagers that were trying to,
Those
take over
pesky
websites
teenagers,
or,
yeah. I was
whatever it
I was one
was.
of those, yes.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And so, but from those early days where teenagers were just trying to, get their name out there, now you have basically organized crime. So they have figured out how to monetize security in a negative way. And so it really boils down to what do you trust? And obviously if you're trying to attack an application, once the application becomes hardened, if you're an attacker, you'll go below the application. You go to either the operating system or a VMM, something like that, to try to get below the protections. And that trend has been happening for years now. And the result of that trend is that as the attackers continue to try to get lower and lower, but below the protections that are being delivered by the industry, we're now to the point where the next attack area is hardware and firmware. And the firmware is the low level software that runs on the hardware. And so, what does it take, or what should companies be thinking about and looking for? They should be asking the fundamental question: do I understand the state of my hardware? Is it safe? Has it been updated from known vulnerabilities? Do I have a process to make sure that that's in fact the case on an ongoing basis? This sounds very basic, but I can tell you, if you don't have trusted hardware, then no matter what you are doing above that in whatever application you've bought from whatever security vendor, it doesn't matter. If the hardware is compromised, the software that's running on that hardware is compromised. And so it starts from that aspect. Do you have that? Do you have that understanding? And from there, if you do have trust in the hardware, then you can start to build trust on top of that secure foundation.
Yeah, I love the layered approach. Another topic that seems quite at the forefront, of course, supply chain and supply chain security. We're in a bit of chaos, as you know better than I, but also digital supply chain security. So, what's the approach, best practices around securing these new digital supply chains around the world?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and obviously you can't really look at anything in the news or anything that without hearing the word supply chain. And a lot of what the supply chain talk that you hear about now is really focused around um, availability. So, in years past, there was supply chain people, but their focus was mostly around making the most efficient supply chain possible. And so, what they were doing was pulling cost out of the supply chain, and products were showing up just before they were needed, just in time. Those types of trends, which were very efficient for reducing costs. But as soon as you started to get problems like with COVID-19 or with some of the other turmoil that's going on around the world, the problem with those highly efficient, low cost supply chains is that they are very brittle.
Hmm.
And so now you're hearing a lot about supply chain, but it's because you can't get, chips for building cars, or other issues. But at the same time, in the security world, the reality is that you also see what some people are calling supply chain attacks. And what they're doing is, again, they're looking for the weakest link in a product's security posture. And so again, you have all these designers that are out there trying to build the most secure designs possible, and they know that in order to do that, you need to update the product on a regular basis. And so in some cases, the attackers are attacking the update process. And so you see a whole series of kind of interesting aspects there. Or they're attacking um, code fragments that are reused in thousands and thousands of different areas that people just don't even think about. They just kind of grab it from GitHub or wherever and throw it
Hmm.
into their code and think that it's safe, but in fact, it's 15-year-old code that hasn't been looked at before, and it has security vulnerabilities. So there's that level as well. And so digital supply chain is really the question. The question that it aims to solve is, again, do you understand the state of your device, and not just of the hardware itself, but also of the software? And so, for example, at Intel, what we're pushing and what we have been working with the industry on for several years now, all the way back to 2019, which sounds like a lifetime ago,
It is, yes.
is yeah, which is it's called transparent supply chain. And what transparent supply chain does is it provides it, first of all, it captures information when a device is first manufactured. So at whatever site, let's say you bought from Lenovo or you bought from some other OEM. Well, those OEMs use what are called ODMs. Those are the people that are actually making the box on behalf of whoever the company is. And so these companies are spread around the world, and they all have tools that are provided by Intel in order to program our chips and do the things that you have to do in manufacturing. So we've added capabilities to those tools that already exist to capture the information from the shop floor control system. Sorry. Uh, and so we capture the information of the devices that are used to build that specific platform. It's not a generic recipe, it's that specific device. So we capture serial numbers, lot code, date code, country of origin, all kinds of different things, information about that machine. And then we sign that, call it the recipe. We sign that recipe for that platform using a unique identifier that's unique to that platform. So we know exactly what was used to build that specific device. And then we store that information so that when the device shows up to a customer, they can run a local test on their local device and compare that to what was built the day that it was built. And you can compare that. And that's a form of digital supply chain where you can see firmware versions and all of the information about the device. And what we look to do over time is keep that information updated over the device's life. So you always know what is the expected state of the device. Has it been updated? Are there new vulnerabilities that may or may not be relevant for that platform? And then so you always know, can you trust it or not? And that's a form of digital supply chain.
That is fantastic. How much of your team's work is sort of proactive product development, like you described with digital supply chain? How much is kind of reacting to these, market forces and attacks and threats? How do you get
Yeah.
that balance right?
When I first started, we were almost entirely reactive. And we were working to get our get ahead basically of vulnerabilities that were coming in. And people think about vulnerabilities in a lot of cases like a quote unquote mistake that was made in the design. Sometimes that's true. But oftentimes what the design is working exactly the way it was designed to do. And what's happened is that people have come up with new ways to use security to attack a machine. And so
Wow.
security and security attacks constantly evolve. And so when I first started, and this is about 3 years ago or so, for client security, we were very much reacting. We were trying to get in front of this. I'm happy to say over the period now for the last 3 years or so, we've really turned the tide, and now to where almost all of the issues that we're working on are actually internally found. And so we're very proactive, and we're taking all those learnings, not only of things that we're finding today, but also of issues that were found, many times months ago or years ago. And we're working with designers so our future products don't fall prey to the same issues. And as a result, the numbers are also coming down. So we're much more proactive now than we were even just a few years ago.
Oh, that's interesting. In looking at some of your content on your LinkedIn page and Twitter, and I encourage everyone to follow Tom. He's got an amazing feed on both platforms. You talk a fair amount about sustainability overlap
Yeah.
between, security and computing, and how Intel tries to reduce carbon footprint. That doesn't seem like a security task or goal. What's going on there?
Yeah, it's kind of strange, isn't it? It turns out all that transparency that I was talking about earlier, where you want to know for security reasons, you want to understand about the devices that were used to build your device. Well, it turns out that that same knowledge is very, very relevant when it comes to sustainability. So if you want to understand the carbon footprint of a particular device, we need to understand a lot about what was used to build it. Now, what some people don't realize is when you think about like the carbon footprint of, let's say, a PC or a server, um, the carbon footprint of uh, a PC, about 80% of the entire life of the device, about 80% of the carbon footprint uh, is part of what we call embodied carbon. It's the carbon that was used to make the device.
Hmm.
80%.
Wow.
And even if the device lasts 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it is, it's 80% for like a laptop. If you look at a server, it's the opposite. It's about
Hmm.
20% is embodied carbon, about 80% is the in-use carbon.
Oh, wow.
And so when you think about a client device, if you want to go after and try to reduce the carbon footprint of a client platform, of course you're going to try to do things like make it more energy efficient, whatnot, but that's going after the 20%. What you really need to do is focus on the device itself and reduce the component count, make the motherboard that's on the device smaller,
Hmm.
uh, look at the manufacturing process and move to low temperature solder, which reduces the amount of energy required to design or manufacture the board. These are all very, very important aspects of sustainability, that you know the device, you can make your device selection appropriately, you can reduce the use of conflict minerals and all those kinds of things that are important for sustainability, but it reuses the same infrastructure that we put in place for security reasons.
Hmm.
And so that's really the bridge between the two.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I was a double E about 30 years ago, so this is warming my heart hearing some of these
Yeah.
techniques
Yeah,
and
the crazy thing is
approaches.
that's my degree as well. I have an electrical engineering degree, and I joke with people I haven't used it a day since I got it, but
I'm guessing you don't have a soldering iron in the garage,
I do not.
but
Yeah.
really, really interesting stuff. I'm just shifting gears. Intel, as everyone knows, is going through just an amazing transformation and renewal, and we're all sort of watching from the outside. What's that like from the inside? What have you noticed as a veteran at Intel?
Yeah, it's a challenge on some levels.
Mhm.
It's exciting in others. I think when you fundamentally believe in the strategy of where you're trying to get to as a company, um, that's a very powerful aspect, and that's where I find myself. Like, yeah, it's really difficult to get through the transformation,
Mhm.
and there are good days and there are bad days. But as long as you believe in where you're trying to get to, it makes it all worthwhile. And I think as a company, we're transforming to do the right things, not just the right things for our shareholders and
Mhm.
for our employees, but really for the world. And you know what Pat's doing, our CEO, is a huge, huge undertaking. But I think it's the right fundamental set of steps. And what we just have to do now is the hard work to get from where we are today to where we're going in the future. But I fundamentally believe that we're on the the right track, the right strategy. It's just a matter of doing the work to get there.
Fantastic. Well, many of us tech geeks are longtime fans of Intel and are out here watching with excitement, and things like the Chips Act and other initiatives.
Oh
Just
yeah.
so exciting with what's happening. And thanks for joining and sharing a bit of your vision and your team's group. Frankly, I had no idea you were at the cutting edge of this topic of supply chain security and beyond. So Take care. We're back to work, so have a good September,
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
look forward to following you on the socials.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
Take care.